Of the fiscal year 2017 Interior Environment Related Agency bill. I want to thank all our colleagues, especially Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Lowy, for joining us today. Before we get into the details of the bill, I want to take a moment to thank my good friend and Ranking Member Ms. McCollum for her partnership and work on this bill. I also want to thank each of our subcommittee members for their active participation in the hearing process this year and the congeniality that continues to be a hallmark of our subcommittee's deliberations. I also want to recognize our friend and colleague, Steve Israel, who is leaving Congress at the end of this year to go back to being a private citizen. Congratulations.
Elevated.
Yeah, elevated. Yes.
Early release.
That's right. And lastly, I want to thank the staff, both the majority and minority, for all the hard work that they put into this bill and continue to do for this committee. The fiscal year 2017 Interior Environment bill is funded at $32.095 billion, which is $64 million below the FY17 enacted level and $1 billion below the budget request. We've made a sincere effort to prioritize critical needs within our 302B allocation, reviewing nearly 5,300 member requests. The committee has again provided robust wildland fire funding in its fiscal year 2017 bill. Fire suppression accounts, including the flame reserve bill, are again fully funded at the 10-year average level, which rose by $133 million from last year. The committee also concluded funds to address many concerns raised about forest health and active forest management, including $30 million to increase the hazardous fuels account. The bill also makes critical investments in Indian country, a top priority of this committee. Overall, funding for the Bureau of Indian Affairs and Education has increased by $72 million, or 3%, while funding for the Indian Health Service has increased by $271 million, or 6%, from fiscal year 2016 levels, the largest increase in the bill. The bill fully funds contract support costs and tribal grant school support costs, provides funding to staff newly constructed health facilities, addresses the rising costs of medical inflation, improves public safety, and invests an additional $40 million in fiscal year 2017 to address critical needs of elementary and secondary schools throughout the BIE system. The bill provides full funding in fiscal year 2017 for payments in lieu of taxes, otherwise known as PILT. The bill also provides $2.9 billion for the National Park Service, including more than $65 million in new funding to address the maintenance backlog and other priorities related to the centennial of the National Park Service. We've also attempted to address a number of concerns within the Fish and Wildlife Service accounts. The bill funds popular grant programs at slightly above fiscal year 2016 enacted levels. It also provides additional funds to combat international wildlife trafficking, protects fish hatcheries from cuts and closures, continues funding to fight evasive mussels and Asian carp, and reduces the backlog of species that are recovered but not yet delisted. The bill also provides $322 million for the Land and Water Conservation Fund for programs that enjoy broad bipartisan support. Overall, funding for EPA is reduced by $164 million from fiscal year 2016 enacted levels. Several members of the subcommittee will be pleased to know that the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative is maintained at fiscal year 2016 enacted level of $300 million. Again, this year there's a great deal of concern over the number of regulatory actions being pursued by EPA in the absence of legislation without clear congressional direction. For this reason, the bill includes a number of provisions to address these concerns and stop unnecessary and damaging regulatory overreach by the agency. Before closing, I'd like to make an additional point about an issue of great concern to members of this committee, the challenges facing not only Flint, Michigan, but communities across the country addressing lead in drinking water. This is not a partisan issue. What occurred in Flint has called greater attention to aging infrastructure and the need for prudent management and oversight of water systems. This bill provides targeted investments and prioritizes resources that will help the EPA, states, and communities respond to Flint and other affected areas nationally by addressing the entire water system. Specifically, The bill provides for an increase of $207 million above fiscal year 2016 enacted level for drinking water state revolving fund. It also includes $50 million for the new Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation, otherwise known as WIFIA, program, which may be leveraged through direct federal loans or loan guarantees to fund $3 to $5 billion worth of infrastructure projects nationwide. In addition, the bill provides increases for state grants for improved state oversight and operations of drinking water systems, and for communities to work on integrated plans for pipe replacement. The bill also directs the GAO to assess the number of lead service lines by state. Lastly, the committee is taking an additional step to provide relief to communities like Flint by including bill language that allows states to use the state revolving fund dollars to forgive a portion of a community's outstanding prior year loans. This and other steps taken in this bill will have a real impact. This markup is the beginning of a long process. I hope over the coming months we'll come together as we do each year to find common ground. And in that spirit, I'll continue to work with Ms. McCollum and the other members of this subcommittee. Before yielding, I need to remind members that this committee rules require that copies of the bill and report remain in the room at the conclusion of today's markup. With that, I'm happy to yield to Ms. McCollum for any opening remarks she would like to make. Ms. McCollum.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I, too, would like to express my sincere gratitude for a friendship I've had with a classmate, Mr. Israel, who is going to be leaving this committee and leaving Congress to go on to a new chapter in his life. And as an author, I'm sure there might be many, many chapters coming in your life. I'd also like to thank...
as many books as a gentleman from Utah.
Yeah, we have two. We'll be down to one author, Mr. Chair. I would also very much share your appreciation and all the work that our staff does together, the way in which they work together to make our jobs much easier. And as you pointed out, there's a lot of work for them coming down the pike here. So I would like to thank the staff for what they've done today and what they're going to be doing tomorrow. But Mr. Chairman, I would also like to thank you and your staff and working with me and our staff for such a collaborative approach. This subcommittee has a very challenging portfolio of issues, and I really want to commend the chair's efforts to find solutions in another difficult budget year. However, the majority's failure to adopt a budget resolution and its piecemeal approach to the subcommittee's 230B's allocations this year made our work more difficult. More, however, such a lack of transparency has placed the entire committee at a disadvantage and has pushed us far from what I consider regular order in having our allocations at the beginning of the appropriations process. The FY17 subcommittee allocation, as been pointed out, is $64 million less than the fiscal year 2016 enacted level. And that means many of the needs of important programs vital to protecting our nation's natural and cultural resources will not be met as they far outpace a stagnant allocation. With this constrained top-line number, it's difficult choices had to be made. And sadly, important programs vital to protecting our nation's natural and cultural resources did not receive adequate funding. Most significant programmatic cuts were in the Environmental Protection Agency, which is going to receive $164 million less than the FY 2016 enacted level. This will cut the impact of the agency's ability to protect human health, the health of our environment, to ensure clean air and clean water for our families and for our children. This year, the critical need for the EPA was unmistakably pointed out as our nation watched a tragedy unfold in Flint, Michigan, where children were poisoned by the lead in their drinking water. So I find it difficult to reconcile the cuts recommended in this bill with the public health challenges faced by this country. Flint is an accumulation of years of weakening the EPA through budget cuts, over-reliance on state agencies to manage federal environmental laws, and our communities deserve and expect their government to provide clean water and basic public health protections. The residents, the children of Flint, were betrayed by their state government, and to this day, they still do not have safe drinking water available from the tap in their house or their school. The levels provided in this bill for the state revolving funds are inadequate to deal with the decaying infrastructure in our nation, no less the emergency in Flint. So I look to work with the chair, with all the members of the House, to improve those numbers. And that's why it's appropriate and imperative for this committee to work to find those additional funds. Flint is an emergency designation. While this bill does not provide funds specifically for Flint, I want to thank the chair for the language in the bill that provides additional authority for states to offer debt relief within areas of elevated levels of lead in their drinking water. This is a good thing, Mr. Chair, but there's still more work that needs to be done. I'm very proud of this subcommittee's nonpartisan approach by addressing the issues facing our Native American brothers and sisters. And while I'm pleased that this bill recommends an increase of $443 million for programs critical to Indian country, I would be remiss if I did not point out that even with this increase, funding for Native American programs is still $172 million less than the administration's request. But, Mr. Chair, we work together to do our best. Nonetheless, this bill, by working together, will keep our commitment to providing Native American students with safe schools that are conducive to full learning and fully funds contract support costs so that tribes are not penalized for exercising their self-determination rights. This bill also recommends $3.9 million, or a 12% increase of the subcommittee's allocation for wildland fires. But once again, the majority has failed to adopt a very common-sense reform bill championed by Chairman Simpson's Wildfire Disaster Fund building, and every single member of this subcommittee is a co-sponsor of that bill. So, Mr. Simpson, we stand with you to bring it to the floor. But once again, the majority has not done that. Citing committee jurisdiction, we're not able to do it here. Jurisdictional issues aside, however, did not hinder the majority for including harmful legislative riders. And I must express my deep concern and disappointment with the 29 bipartisan riders in this bill. It's veto bait. Such provisions that seek to turn back protections for endangered species, restrict control of greenhouse gas emissions, undermine clean water and clean air protections. They do not belong in this bill, and their effect would be to undermine important environmental laws, endanger public health and safety, and deny that climate change is having an impact on our planet. However, I am very happy to say that one of the bright spots in this bill is the continued support for our National Park Services Centennial Initiative. The bill recommends an additional $800 million for the Centennial. These funds will be used to strengthen the foundation of services and make essential infrastructure investments. I'm also pleased that there's an additional $3 million provided for the Civil Rights Initiative grant program, fundings included, and grants and aids to historical Black colleges and universities. Finally, I would like to thank the chairman for working to resurrect Save America's Treasures program. This program funds preservation of national significant site structures and artifacts. I am proud that we were able to restart this important program, and I will work diligently to make sure that's included in the final bill. I look forward to working together with you, Mr. Chair, and all the committee members on an appropriations process to produce a responsible bill that both parties support. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your courtesy of an opening statement, and I yield back.
Thank you. Thank you for your opening statement. Now I'm happy to yield to the distinguished chairman of the full committee, Mr. Rogers.
Thank the chairman. And thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ms. McCollum, for your hard work on bringing this very important piece of legislation to the committee and the floor eventually. All the members of the subcommittee, you have a dizzying array of jurisdiction. It covers a huge slice of the government's funding, and you worked hard to make a good bill, and I salute you. You're funded at the discretionary level of $32.1 billion. You have a significant impact upon the management and preservation of our natural resources, as well as our ability to grow the economy and create jobs. You've included important provisions and made key investments that will ensure the health of our environment while pushing back on burdensome regulations that threaten jobs without achieving additional environmental protections. Notably, as has been mentioned, the bill makes important steps to address the drinking water quality issues all over the country. The bill provides states with the necessary resources to ensure that their water systems are safe and properly managed. Bill also extends the payment in lieu of taxes program for a year, meets our obligations to Native Americans, and provides full funding for wildfire suppression. In addition, as has been noted, you include money to the National Park Service in celebration of their 100th year of existence. Along with the 017 budget request, the President has again proposed his Power Plus plan as a means of bringing jobs back to Appalachian towns that have been decimated by the downturn in the coal industry. In my view, this plan is a day late and over 11,000 coal mining jobs short. But this committee, thankfully, shares a commitment to the communities that are struggling under the weight of the administration's onerous regulatory agenda. Last year, this subcommittee refined the specific Power Plus proposal regarding abandoned mine lands to pilot the concept of pairing mine reclamation with economic development. I'm encouraged by the progress of this program thus far, and I'm pleased that the subcommittee will expand the pilot program this year to include 3 additional states. While innovative economic development programs hold great promise for revitalizing these struggling communities, there's no question that regulations aimed at killing coal are largely to blame for the over 11,000 mining jobs lost in my district alone since 2008. Until we see relief from the onslaught of regulations coming out of this administration, we'll continue to see jobs eliminated in this sector. Accordingly, I'm pleased to see that the subcommittee has included several provisions that will protect our constituents from bureaucratic overreach and reverse the devastating impact that these anti-coal policies are having on jobs and the economy. Specifically, the bill takes action to prevent the implementation of the Waters of the United States rule, new greenhouse gas emission standards for coal-fired power plants, and the pending stream protection rule. These regulations will force us to move away from our nation's cheapest and most dependable source of energy in favor of more expensive and less reliable options, meaning higher bills and less certainty for hardworking families everywhere. So, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the hard work of this subcommittee in crafting this bill. It's a good bill. I want to thank all the members for taking part in its construction and hoping that the bill has broad support, and I think it will. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm now happy to yield to the distinguished ranking member of the full committee, Mrs. Lowy.
Well, thank you, Chairman Calvert and Ranking Member McCullum, for your hard work on this bill, and thank you, Chairman Rogers, as well. The Interior and Environment Bill is the 9th bill to reach subcommittee markup this year. While the markup process is moving quickly, it really is an embarrassment that the committee is proceeding to mark up these bills without adopting a budget or deeming resolution and without a full slate of 302B sub-allocations. Over and over again, the majority promised to return to regular order. This promise has clearly not been kept. The bill before us would provide $32.095 billion for the Department of Interior and Environmental Protection Agency, a decrease of $64 million from the enacted level and a staggering $1 billion below the President's request. As a result, there are serious shortcomings throughout this bill. Once again, the EPA is significantly underfunded. The bill would cut $164 million from already inadequate funding levels and decimate the EPA's operating budget, which supports the execution of regulations that protect public health and safety. The crisis in Flint is a horrifying reminder that starving an agency like EPA causes serious ramifications. 8,000 under under the age of 6 have likely been exposed to lead contamination. The long-term impacts of that exposure are severe and will not end when the water is clean. Decades or even a lifetime of difficulty may plague those affected. And even considering the severity of the Flint water crisis, the House majority has cut the state revolving funds. If the tragedy in Flint has shown us anything, it is that we must invest in our nation's infrastructure. Perhaps the most concerning aspect of this bill is the inclusion of misguided and dangerous policy riders. These controversial riders, year after year, imperil the appropriations process. The bill would block the administration's effort to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, stop the EPA from implementing its lead renovation, repair, and painting rule, blocking EPA from protecting millions of at-risk children from increased exposure to lead, and once again attack the Endangered Species Act as politics are placed above science, jeopardizing the protection of precious species. Neither Democrats in Congress nor President Obama will agree to poison pill riders that cause harm to our environmental public health. These riders put the appropriations process at risk. Among some good aspects of this bill, the National Park Centennial Initiative would receive an $80 million increase. Additionally, the bill provides funding for competitive historic preservation grant programs for historical Black colleges and universities and the Civil Rights Initiative. I do hope we can work together to remove harmful riders and improve this interior bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. With that, are there any members of the subcommittee who would like to be heard before the bill before us today? Mr. Israel.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Let me thank you for your leadership and my colleague, Ms. McCullum. The chairman has been fair and a very thoughtful partner, and I'm indebted to you for the work that you have done and the relationship that we have had. Ms. McCullum and I have both came here in the mighty class of 2000. She, I think, well, she's not a sole survivor of that class, but we always knew she would outlast all the rest of us when we came here. And I want to thank my colleagues for their collegiality. Very briefly, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank the chairman and the ranking member for supporting increased resources for the National Park Service, for supporting increased investments in fish and wildlife, for enforcement of wildlife trafficking, and for language which encourages the National Park Service to work with the Theodore Roosevelt Association on interpretive markers in Roosevelt Island. I did want to state one very deep matter of concern in the hopes that we can address it going forward, and that is the level of funding for the Long Island Sound. 3 members of the Appropriations Committee have districts that adjoin the Long Island Sound. Our ranking member, Ms. Lowy, Ms. DeLauro from Connecticut, and myself. But it's not just us. 20 million Americans live within 50 miles of the Long Island Sound. 10% of the entire country lives in the watershed of the Long Island Sound. And the economic value of the Long Island Sound to our national economy is as high as $37 billion. The President's request for funding was woefully inadequate. I want to acknowledge that. $2.9 million. The subcommittee funded the Long Island Sound at $3.9 million. That remains inadequate given the economic generation from the Sound and the number of Americans who live nearby. Other significant estuaries in the country receive literally tens of millions of dollars of funding, and $4 million is just not enough for the Long Island Sound to be fully protected and for those who work near and on the Long Island Sound to do their work. So I am hopeful that we can find some place in between the President's woefully inadequate request and the $10 million that I requested as we go to full committee. And I want to thank the chairman. I do hope that we can work together on that. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. As you know, this is the beginning of a process, so we'll see what happens. Mr. Kilmer.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to you and to the ranking member for your work on the bill. I also appreciate the hard work of your staffs, Rita and Jocelyn, Jacqueline, Darren, Dave, and others, for really the excellent work to try to accommodate all the requests that came in, both from the committee and from off, and certainly representing a lot of high priorities from my neck of the woods. I want to just echo the gratitude for trying to address some of the concerns of Indian country, protecting the resources around Indian health and education, and addressing some, I think, really long-term resiliency challenges facing tribal communities. I also want to thank you for prioritizing increased funding for the USGS around the early earthquake warning system and volcano hazards. These are critical to monitoring and detecting seismic and volcanic activity, and will save lives. This is providing extra seconds can literally save lives. And the draft makes some real progress in a bunch of areas. I want to thank you for that. But for the EPA generally and for the Puget Sound in particular, I'm hopeful that more can be done. The Puget Sound is a gift, and it is an icon of my region that benefits the entire nation, but it's a sick body of water, and we're in danger of losing it. And thankfully, we have a plan in place to turn things around, but to accomplish those restoration goals requires federal funding. And the funds through the Puget Sound Geographic Program and the National Estuary Program are really critical to those ongoing efforts. This matters. This matters to tribal communities who've lived on the Sound from time immemorial, and to whom we have a trust responsibility to ensure that the Sound remains healthy and is able to generate productive resources for generations to come. It also matters to the overall health of my region's economy, to the viability of these waterways over the long term. This is an economic driver for my region, and it requires the necessary investments to protect it and to restore it. So my plea to you, Chairman, and to Ranking Member McCollum is to just impress upon you the importance of the Sound and to the investments to recover it, not just for my district, but for the entire Pacific Northwest, and hope that we can continue to work with you and your staff to ensure that adequate resources are made available.
We'll be happy to continue to work with you. Thank you. Thank you. Any additional comments, Mr. Cole?
Yeah, just quickly, Mr. Chairman, first of all, I want to make the point, I know you had a tough budget allocation, and some of these places where we came in below the president's number, it's worth pointing out he uses mandatory funding to reach that number, which we have no jurisdiction to do, and as far as I know, there was no serious effort to actually achieve on a part of the administration. Having said that, I once again want to commend you and certainly the ranking member for really excellent work on Indian country. And that's not been one chairman. It's been a succession of chairmen, beginning with Mr. Dix and Mr. Moran, Mr. Simpson, now yourself, and a succession of ranking members. In any one year, you would always like to do more, but I'd like to look over several years and see what the arc is. And in healthcare alone, we're 50% higher than we were in 2011. And if you want to talk about something, this bill that saves lives, that has saved lives. That has made an enormous difference. So, we certainly have a long way to go. This, by any measure you want to use, Native Americans who are a special charge of this committee and of the federal government, given the trust relationship, had been neglected for decades. But I think in the last several years, under both Democrats and Republicans, and I want to thank the administration here too, which has played a leading role in this as well, we've made substantial progress in the right direction. And we've done it in sort of the old-fashioned way of appropriating, which is, over time, everything is incremental and cumulative. But this has been increments and accumulations in the right direction that have made an enormous difference. So I want to, again, thank you very, very much in a tough budget for continuing to prioritize Native Americans and their challenges. I want to thank my friend, Ms. McCollum, who's done certainly the same thing in her capacity as ranking member. I appreciate the fact that this committee has in recent years started actually going out and putting eyeballs and feet on the ground in Indian country, and has done that with secretaries of the Interior and with the BIA officials and head of the BIA on multiple occasions. That's a good thing. The more knowledgeable we've become, I think the more sustained and serious the investments have been, and more thoughtful they've been than they were combined in this committee. So a lot of things in this bill that I like, that in other areas as well, and I'm very pleased with. But this in particular, I just want to congratulate you and Ms. McCullum. It's an exceptional and extraordinary job. It's a commitment you've maintained together, and it's a genuinely bipartisan approach to one of the thorniest issues that the federal government has dealt with over the course of its entire existence. You could look at this committee and what's been accomplished in the last 5 years and take a great deal of pride in the Democrats and Republicans working together to redress historic wrongs, grievances, and to try and provide the kind of resources that actually make a difference in people's lives. So just thank you very much.
Thank you, and we're going to try to visit future tribes in the future. So, Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will be brief. I'd like to thank you and other members on the minority and majority for your tone and for the leadership that you set, and I do appreciate that, and I think most of us do, and that I believe many of us are trying to work in a sincere effort to better things. Many of the requests that we had, I would say even most of them, were accommodated in some fashion, and we're grateful for that and recognize the staff going through hundreds and hundreds of these in the amount of time that takes. There are a couple things that we are still concerned about, sage grouse monuments, a couple others, and I know that we'll have a chance to address that in the full committee. There's one that I would like to mention just briefly because we're really going to need our Democratic friends to help us on this, and that is to avoid this, and this is an issue that all of us are familiar with, but these animals that, as I've said, if you care about these animals like I do, we can't just continue with what's happening here. By the BLM's own estimate that they gave us just in the last few days, it's going to cost $1 billion to care for these animals in the next few years. $1 billion. There's more than 67,000 of them now, and they expect that number is going to double in 4 years. That's the BLM's estimate. And it just seems like we can throw our hands up and say, this is too hard, we can't fix it. But that just seems unacceptable, and we're hoping that we can find some bipartisan agreement where we would do something meaningful. And Mr. Israel, we've worked out with your staff. I know you have a certain view on this, as do others. We would hope that we would be able to find something where we feel like we're not just having tens of thousands of animals that look like this out on our range. But I don't know what the answer is right now. I really don't. Hope in the next couple of weeks we can work together with others to find something that helps. And again, thank you and all the members for your great work on the committee.
Thank you, and you're right. We need to find a solution to that. Mr. Joyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll be brief, but I want to thank the chairman and certainly the ranking member and all the members of the staff for their intense work on what has always a lot of thorny issues within this bill. I would be remiss if I didn't wish congratulations to Mr. Israel and his retirement. From one of his jobs, I was the focus of his attention for a long period of time, and it goes to show that where gentlemen and women agree, we can move our nation together. And I've appreciated working with you and developing our friendship over the years. Although when I did try to give him some of my wife's homemade Buckeyes, I had to eat one, or promise to eat one in front of him first to make sure he didn't think that I was trying to poison him. But truly, I want to thank you for your allocation to the Great Lakes. It is something, and during your retirement, you should stop by and you can have some more profound thoughts on this beautiful Great Lakes while you're writing your books, Mr. Israel. But it is something that is not just a lake or a series of lakes. It's a national treasure, and it needs to be protected and preserved as such. And certainly the seriousness shown by this committee to deal with that issue is very important, and it sends a message because even our president asked for much less than what this committee has seen fit to grant us, and I appreciate that. And it goes to show you, and God forbid what happened in Flint, Michigan, but there's a potable water supply that we had that was clean, and some incompetent bureaucrat decided to switch and poison these kids, and that's wrong, all to save a few dollars. And if they would have stuck with the Great Lakes, which feeds potable drinking water to over 40 million Americans, this country would have been better off. So thank you for your foresight in seeing that, Mr. Chairman, and God bless you.
Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing None? Oh, Mr. Simpson? None? Okay, seeing none, are there any amendments to the bill? Seeing no more requests, I recognize Mr. Simpson of Idaho to the purpose of making a motion.
That's why I was turning this on. But before I make the motion, I just did want to say, Mr. Kilmer, Norm Dix would have been proud of your defense of the Puget Sound. And I did want to say also thank you to the chairman and the ranking member for the great work they do. Probably the two hardest bills to put together in this whole place are the Labor, Health, and Human Services bill and Interior. And I have the dubious honor of serving on both those subcommittees, but Mr. Cole does a great job, as do you. And thanks to the staff who is truly remarkable staff on this subcommittee, as it is on most of the subcommittees that we have in this place. But with that, I move that the bill be favorably reported to the full committee.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The motion is agreed to. I ask unanimous consent that the staff be permitted to make technical and conforming changes to the measure just approved. Let me remind the members again to please leave their copies of the bill report in the room. And I move to that this subcommittee be adjourned.
Congratulations.